Good morning. So fun to see everybody. You know, you're not a very big group, but boy, when I say good morning, you're loud. It's great. So our theme this month is extravagant abundance, and today it's direct contact. So we start with our very basic universal truth principle, that there is only one power, one presence, in, through, and as all creation, and yet beyond all creation. And it is absolute. The absolute does not have a need for anything. It is already complete in and of itself, and the absolute is already here and right now. And we, every one of us in this room and the entire earth cosmos, is made in the image and likeness of the absolute. So we actually are in need of nothing right now. That at the very heart of who we are, our essence, everything has already been given. It's already here. And that is what extravagant abundance is. Thank you very much. It's so great, isn't it? More music. So that's such a wonderful principle. It's a wonderful truth. But I had a conflict with this truth, and that has a lot to do with what my experience has been. So I grew up, and so I have a brother, my middle brother. It's the one I tend to talk a lot about. His name is George, and I'm saying his name specifically because he might be here next Sunday, so you can give him a hard time next week. So I talk about growing up in a family of primarily agnostic and atheist, and he was definitely atheist as a young boy. Of all my siblings, he's the most open at this point to other possibilities. But when he was in a junior high school, I remember him arguing with our neighbor, Michael Keefe, across the street, who was Catholic, about why there wasn't a God, or why it didn't matter if there was a God. And he had 3 points. I'm not going to go to the 3 points, because the one specifically that I was thinking about today in terms of extravagant abundance is I remember, so one of his 3 points was only weak people needed God. That if you had a strong sense of who you were, that you could create your own reality, that we are incredibly amazing human beings, and if we put our mind to it, we can create anything. We can do what we want, and he has always believed that he can make a difference in the world, and he is. So he's fully lived out this life, and I grew up in a community that was primarily agnostic and atheist or secular in their views. And I only think that primarily because I had, as I've talked about before, a deep belief in God as a child, and I was very clear this was something not to be talked about, not only with my family, but with my friends. I just was very, because you were sort of considered less intelligent if you had a faith in God, so sort of the less intelligent ones did. So I didn't want to be, call myself out or anything as being flaky or stupid, so I kept it to myself. So I grew up in this community that really valued achievement, really valued human capacity and human strength and humanism. And what I've seen is they've been very successful in life. They've done very well, and they're good people. In fact, atheists are known to have incredibly high ethics, very high values of how to treat people, because they don't depend on anyone else. They say, it's up to us. If we want this world to work, we got to do it, and the only way we can do it is if we work together. So I got to see this experience within my own family and with the people I was raised. And so then I go into the God community. And it was interesting, Gary Simmons. How many are familiar with that person, Gary Simmons? People involved in church. Gary Simmons is a Unity minister. And after decades of being a minister, he stepped back and he started doing a lot of what makes churches, spiritual communities work. Did a lot of research, loves integral theory, Ken Wilber integral theory, started applying it to churches. How can we become more fully realized? So he started working with both Unity churches and Centers for Spiritual Living. That's under the umbrella of New Thought, which this community is part of. And what he said is that 4 out of 5, he found the same thing across the board with 4 out of 5 of all these communities, Unity and Centers for Spiritual Living. And he said the basic feedback that he got was, we're not enough. Regardless of what size they were, regardless of how much money they had or whatever their strengths were, their focus was always on, we're not enough. We don't have enough volunteers. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough people in the seats. We don't have enough. And that sort of pervaded the energy. So looking at it from my perspective, this has been a little bit of a conflict. God is infinitely abundant. We're infinitely abundant. Our communities are about infinite abundance, and yet our communities are always struggling with not enoughness. And meanwhile, my agnostic and atheist friends seem to be thriving and doing quite well for themselves. So I'm like, there's something I miss here. And not just them. I was looking up, I don't know what made me do this. I think I was watching a movie with George Clooney in Tomorrowland, and I don't know, I just decided to look up what's his religious beliefs. Agnostic, atheist, Leo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, all agnostic atheists. I'm like, people have done extremely well and serve the world. So I'm thinking about all this and abundance, and extravagant abundance. But here's the challenge. Even if you look at the people who are doing really well, we all know about this growing separation between those who have and those who have not. That in fact, even those who have a lot of abundance, there's a very few amount of them. So I'm just using celebrities because they're famous, so everybody knows them. If I say other people's name, no one knows them. So, and politicians just say what you want to hear, so you can't go by them. So, but if you look at just something like acting, like a George Clooney or Leonardo DiCaprio, there are a tiny, tiny percentage of actors who make that much money, but most are struggling. Most are desperate to get a job. Most, even who've had a job, who had a moment of fame. I remember a voice teacher was saying, she was a casting director, and she said, it always amazes me when I'm casting commercials that these people that I looked up to a decade ago are coming in desperate for just a commercial, just for a little bit of work. So there's a scarcity of amount of work for people even who are in fields that are big, and there's a scarcity in terms of those people who do have a lot of money. It's not for the whole world. So there is still this lack. But I also see there's another limitation. I remember Harrison Ford, this was years ago, was being interviewed, and he was complaining. I saw him actually once in a grocery store, and he had his hat and his collar up, and I'm like, that's the first thing you look at is who's that weirdo with the hat? And I'm like, if you want to draw attention to yourself, it's like, who is that? But I remember he was in this interview and he was complaining about losing his privacy, that he was tired of everywhere he went, people saw him and he could never just be on his own anymore. And I thought the interviewer asked the perfect question. She said, well, would you be willing to give up a little bit of your salary for a little bit more privacy? And he said, absolutely not. And I thought, there you go, his money owns him, that he needs to hold on to it. So here's the challenge that I think we all get caught into being in the world, and this is why we are a spiritually profound community. Because if our identity is on the finite, whether it's a lot in the finite, what we would call a lot, or a little in the finite, we're still in the limited world. Because our identity is with the finite. It still is temporary. It's still just passing. If you have a lot of money, you either have to hold on to it, and that becomes your identity, which is very small, a small identity. In fact, I was, having grown up in an upper middle class community, I can't tell you how many people I've talked with who also were raised in an upper middle class community and had the exact same experience that I had, which is it was a separation thing. Like people would say, oh, I want to come see your house or get it. And I suddenly felt like I was separate. I couldn't wait to be part of the world. No. So having money, you think of someone like a Harrison Ford, they're like in another universe. You don't feel like they're part of all of us. There's a separation that happens. So any identity with anything that makes you special, that makes you separated, is a limitation. If you're identified with your not enoughness in terms of we don't have enough numbers, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough people, that's also an idea of keeping us small. So any identity, the way I look at it is every effect, this entire cosmos, anything we can see is like the tip of an iceberg. But the reality is the abundance is that which is in the invisible. That's which we will never possibly see most of the time in the physical. The infinite is invisible to us. We are just on the surface of that abundance. And so we truly know our infinite well source, our infinite being, our abundance, when we are connected with that infinite self right now. Right now, our individual self has no separate reality. Right now, your individual reality, it's an illusion to say you have a separate reality than anyone else in this room. You do not have a separate reality than anyone else here. Just be with that, just in this moment. There's nothing individual in this room. And when you start being with that, we start finding our hearts start softening, we start opening. It's hard to continue to say, I have no individual reality separate from anyone else in this room, and to stay confined in your body awareness anymore, because now I'm no longer my body awareness. I'm one with everyone in this room right now. And that's abundance. That starts to be the fullness of life. Extravagant abundance is knowing that our source, that which we cannot see, is who and what we really are, and it is infinite, and it is absolute, and it is never in need of anything. So the way we have direct contact in every moment is to stop and say, I have no individual reality separate from anyone else in this room. Whether you're in the grocery store, whether you're driving on the freeway, whether you're at home by yourself or with your animals, I have no separate reality than anyone else. The boundaries of my identity and someone else's starts to dissolve, and we start to feel immediately that direct contact with the extravagant abundance of who and what we are. We start opening to the infinite wellspring of good in this universe. And it's not limited by any identity, whether we call it big or whether we call it small. I'm sure most of you have heard that God sees no big or no small. That is a human mind. Only the human mind makes those distinctions. The human mind will say, that's a lot and that's a little. God does not make that distinction. God is, I am the fullness in everything, no matter how it looks in the external. Internally, I'm already fully abundant, whole, absolute, complete, infinite. So right now, there's nothing missing. I look around the room, we can say, oh, well, there's these empty chairs. There's things missing. We're not enough. We're not full. But we are completely full in this moment. There's nothing lacking in this room. The fullness and the wholeness of spirit is right now. You can look in your life and say, this is lacking or this is lacking. But the truth is when you move past the visible and go underneath, you find the wholeness. And then the opposite is true. Any place where you feel better than, any place where you feel like I'm better than these people, or I'm better than everyone else at my work because I'm at a higher position, or I'm better because of this, that's just as much of an illusion. And that also limits us and constricts our heart. I'm no different. I have no individual reality separate from anyone else on this planet. I am one with all people. And we start to feel the joy of that extravagant abundance that is alive and wanting to be experienced through and as our conscious awareness in every moment. It's incredibly invigorating and joy-filled. So I invite you this week, are you going to try this? I have no individual reality separate from anyone else in this room or for any life form. I have no individuality separate from anything happening. Just continue to remind yourself of that all the time when you're paying bills. You have no individual reality separate from the person you're paying the bills to. As you're giving tithes and donations, I have no individual reality separate and apart from that which I'm giving. And I have no individual reality separate and apart from those who are giving to me. We are one. There's this incredibly loving flow that starts to happen. And that's what Reverend Michael was talking about in his reading, about the divine gold mine is within us. And that's our truest identity. So that's the first thing. And then the last thing, one of the ways we tend to think that life is finite is because we leave this body. Death is a part of life. We hear that all the time. Death is a part of life. But we also need to remember that death is just a temporary shift. That in fact life is eternal, I know some people aren't sure of that. Let me calm your fears. No, I'm kidding. I can only speak for myself, but life is eternal. We continue on. We are infinite beings. We have a transition in form only, but the essence of who we are, our individual soul, goes on forever. There is no limitation. So one of the things, so here I have my dad who's made his transition and my grandma who's made his transition. I want to invite us all this month, I'd like to do for this month, is for people to bring in pictures of people who you love. I have a table there, but beautification could find a nice place to put it or a way to make it nice. But I would like us all throughout the entire month of June to bring in those people that we love so we see their faces and know they're always with us. It's not over. There's no finiteness. There's no limitation. The universe is abundant. It is not limited by time and space ever. It is not limited by a lifespan. It is eternal and infinite. And we do that by not hoping that they're here, but knowing that they are here with us all of the time. Sometimes you tell stories just because they're funny, but they're not necessarily true. This is actually a true story that I read this week, and it just, I don't know, it cracked me up. So Reverend Leo Fishbeck was a prominent religious science, Centers for Spiritual Living minister, and he made his transition this past week. So people on the ministers listserv were sharing their stories of him, and I thought this was just so perfect for today. Someone said, I'll never forget when Reverend Leo was talking at Asilomar. We used to have our conferences at Asilomar. And he was talking and he was saying, you know, it's time for you to stand and claim what you want and not apologize for it. Your Uncle Harry is dead. You know, he's gone. Don't worry about what he thinks. You stand in what you want. And as soon as he said that, the entire power went off in the building. And she said in the silence, he said, I'm sorry, Uncle Harry. They're always listening. So will you bring your pictures in, and you can take them at the end of June. You can take them back home with you. You're not leaving them here, but just for the month of June, I would love to fill our space with the faces of our beloveds. And if there's a picture you want to put of someone you're challenged with and you're still doing healing work, they're also wonderful to bring to continue to allow that healing work to happen within you. So it can be loved ones, but also people you could struggle with, and it can also be spiritual teachers that bring in spiritual teachers that continue to be part of your family, to be part of your life. We are incredibly rich all of the time, and we need to have the eyes behind the eyes that can see that, and the heart behind the heart that can feel that. And finally, I didn't ask him, but I was wondering, I didn't ask him, so I don't want to make him do it if he doesn't want to do it, because I didn't ask him. But he shared another story this week, and Jeff, for some reason, every time I come up with a talk, Jeff is like, life mirrors it. Well, that happens a lot. I get that from a lot of you. And I just want to say, that just tells us that this isn't like a talk I came up with. This is definitely God's giving to all of us. So I don't know, would you be willing to share?
I'm Jeff. I sent this story off to my foundation's friends. Wow, that's loud this week. Okay. And that was pretty much it. It was amazing. Wow. Okay. So some of you guys know I travel a lot, and I was in Ohio this week, and I was out doing some photography one night at this pond called Heron Pond, and it's about an acre size, and I want to get a sunset, and it was just beautiful. It was very quiet, and I'm just kind of walking around, and not thinking about much, and there was a bench right by the water, and so I sat down, just was kind of sitting there being real peaceful, and I said I heard Harriet in my head telling us how I'm always hearing Harriet in my head. It's crazy. Get out of there, Harriet. So I know. She's actually right there. Anyway, the thing I heard in my head was she's been talking about praying out loud and how it'll change your life. And that was kind of a hard thing for me. I feel sort of weird doing it, but I've been, over the last couple of weeks, in my hotel room in the morning, I get up and I do a prayer out loud. And so I'm sitting on this bench. There's nobody around. The sun's going down. It's just beautiful. And I started doing a prayer out loud, and it felt a little bit weird at first. And I just kind of got rolling with it a little bit and was asking God to work through me and help me be peaceful, help me help people, and a lot of things like that, about working through me and just being through me. And I just sort of stopped, and it was just dead silent. And then a frog pops up out of the water, a big frog, and gives 3 loud croaks. Right? And then just disappears. Not even a ripple in the water. Not even a ripple. And I thought that was God coming to me to say, I heard you. And I was sure of it. I was just so sure of it. And there was not even a ripple in the water. And I'm not making this up, And so I emailed the guy, and she emailed me back. And some of you know, my mom passed away, transitioned several years ago, and she comes to me as a white heron, a white egret. I see her in various places from time to time. I at least expect that there will just be one, right? And it's been going on for several years. And so as I'm walking out of this park, I'm the last guy left. The ranger, I can see him over there. He's waiting for me to leave. He's just kind of looking at me. I got my camera with me. And just as I'm walking out, this white heron flies right over me, and just over me, over the fields and out of view, just like that, So it's just kind of amazing. So anyway, that's my story. So...
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for sharing that. We know when we've contacted that presence that transcends our finite form, and it's always here with us. So may we have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and the heart to feel that which is far beyond this visible form and yet closer to us than our very breath. I know what Jeff has shared. I've heard from other people. You experience your divine beloveds on the other side. And so we just want to bring them into our community and say that they're part of our family all of the time. We live this incredibly rich, loving, abundant life all of the time. And our work is just to receive, to accept, and know